Hello there, my name is Mike Talty. I work for Microsoft in the UK, and you can get hold of me via email, miketalty@microsoft.com. You can get hold of me on my website, mtalty.com, and you can get hold of me on Twitter if you want to get in touch. And this is one of a number of short videos on the ActiveTouch site about Silverlight, which is Microsoft's rich internet application technology, currently at version 4. We made an overview video which is at bit.ly/ActiveTouch SL intro. It's a longer video, but it's more comprehensive. And this video is about a particular area of Silverlight that I thought would be just worth illustrating in brief, and that's the idea of navigation. And so navigation, we're very familiar with that from the browser, and Silverlight has its own navigation model within it that's very similar to what you see inside the browser, so you can actually navigate around Silverlight content. And this is really quite powerful because it means that you can give out hyperlinks to content served by Silverlight, and we'll take a very brief look at that here. In this particular video I'll be using the Expression Blend design tool for Silverlight, so if you want to get hold of the tools to follow along, then the right thing to do will be to go to http://www.silverlight.net and the Get Started page. And if you go there, you'll get links to download all the tools. You can get a version of Visual Studio, which is a free version, you get the SDKs, you can get Expression Blend as a trial version, and then I'll just be using Blend through this session. So let's close down this window and run up Expression Blend. Let's just bring up Expression Blend. Okay, so here in Expression Blend, let's just make a new Silverlight project. So we'll just go to the project menu, do File, New Project, make a Silverlight application with a website, click OK. And I'll just use Ctrl-0 to zoom down that artboard. As I've said in other videos, if using Expression Blend, it has lots of windows and panels. You can display the windows by using this menu, and you can then drag these panels around to your heart's content. So if you've got a big monitor or two monitors, then you can drag them off onto separate monitors and so on. I'm kind of using a restricted screen size here just because of the screen recording. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is just take this root control here and make sure it's got reasonable width and height, because Expression Blend tends to hard code it, and I prefer it to be auto so that the UI will size itself dynamically. Having said that, it makes it a bit difficult to design, so we can set a design time width and height on it. And I'll also just set a little bit of color as the background, so just give it I'll just grab the grid there, just set it as a grey or something like that. I'm going to take that grid and mark it out into just sections, so we'll just go and mark it out a little bit like so. Just give me a central area that I can be dynamically sized, proportionally sized. And into there I'm going to put the root of the Silverlight navigation system. Now you could allow this control to take over all the space of your UI or not. It's entirely up to you. What I'll do here is just insert one, and it's a control called the frame control, so I'll just double click that, and then using the V key to select it and just drag it into this space and lay it out over there. So this is a frame, in some ways a little bit like an HTML frame, and what its job is to present pages of content. And just to illustrate that very simply, let's go to our project and create a few pages. So we'll go over to the project and we'll just make some pages over here. So we'll just make a new folder perhaps. Let's go and add a folder. We'll call it Pages. And into that folder let's just go and add some pages. So we'll add new items. It's going to be a page. And let's make this very simple. Let's call this one circle.xaml. Let's add another one which we'll call square.xaml. And let's add another one which we'll call triangle.xaml. Okay, you can probably guess where this is going. Let's go to this circle.xaml here and just Ctrl-0 to zoom the artboard. And into this we've got a grid again as the background for this page. So what I'll just do is specify the properties of that, and we'll make the background of this one red. Crikey, that's quite red. Let's make it a little bit less red. And into there, this one's called what? Circle. And into there what we'll do is put a circle. So we'll just go and find an ellipse, double click to insert that. Actually it's not that ellipse that I want, it's well actually to be fair that ellipse will do, so let's just double click that ellipse. Let's just put this there. I think I was getting confused about the kind of ellipse I was creating. Let's just set an absolute width and height on this, so let's just go for 250 by 250, and let's make sure it has no particular margins around it, so we'll just go and reset the margins over here and make sure it's in the center of the space. So we've got our circle, and let's go and do a similar thing with the square.xaml. So we're going to insert a rectangle here, and again, let's just set the background color of this before we do that. Let's set it to something very obvious. So go for some kind of green in there. Let's go and insert this rectangle. Let's select it, give it a width and height. So just again, we'll say 250 by 250, that'll make it square. And then we'll just give it 0 margin and make sure it's lined out in the middle. So there it is. And our other one was called triangle, so let's go to triangle. Similar sort of theme. Let's go to the root element. Let's just go and give that a color, which might be some kind of blue. That's fine. Let's go and find a triangle. Just insert a triangle there. Select it. Give it a width and height of 250 by 250 and put it into the middle. And so we've got those 3 different pages in there. And so now if we go back and revisit this main page, we've got our frame, and we can tell that frame, if we just go to its properties, to navigate to a particular page. So we can go ahead and say we want you to display the circle page, for instance. Let's go and run that up and see how it goes. So we can project run, or F5 is another way of doing the same thing. And we spring up the browser. And I'm just going to steal this URL and paste it into Firefox because I'm running the IE9 beta and this isn't quite working for me in this particular case. So I'm just going to spring up Firefox and drop that same URI in there. And you can see we've navigated straight to the circle. The URI is not particularly pretty. We can shorten this. So you'll notice that what's going on is we've kind of got the URI to the page and then we're using the hash. And after the hash, we're using the rest of that to index into Silverlight content. So just as we're going to the circle here, we could equally go to the square. That takes us to the square, and just as we went to the square, we could go to the triangle, and then we could go back to the square, forward to the triangle, back to the square, back to the circle, forward. So we're integrating this with the browser's navigation, which is done through a frame on the browser source page that we're looking at here. So we get integrated navigation with the browser, and it also means that I've got a Silverlight application that serves content, and I could take this URI and hand it out to somebody else, and when they browse to that URI, they're going to jump straight into the middle of this content that we've got here on the screen. So we can just browse backwards and forwards. Now we can also do this inside of Silverlight. So if we go back to our Silverlight application, let's just shut down the 2 browsers that we've got there. And so on our main UI here, let's just go down to this bottom row and let's use a little stack panel. So we'll add a panel down there. So just making sure this is going into the grid here rather than the frame. And I want to just find a stack panel. Let's just search for that. I'll insert the stack panel and then let's just select that and drag it down to this bottom area of the grid down here. I'll just drop it there, fill it out over there. And I'm just going to change the orientation of that panel to be horizontal before adding some buttons into it. So let's find some buttons. So we'll add 1, 2, 3 because we've got 3 pages. And let's see if we can just quickly rename these to change the content to what did we have? Circle, and we had square, and we had triangle. And if I want to cause navigations to occur, there's a couple of ways I could do this. Let's just take the frame and do this in code for a second. I'll just show you how we can do this in code. Let me just make sure I name this frame. Let's call it my frame. And let's just write some code behind this square button, for instance, just as a for instance. So we're just going to write code behind that. We'll go to its events. We'll find its click event, and I'll just say on square, hit return, and we'll drop into the code editor. I'll hit the F4 key so just to space that out differently so that you can see it. And then what I want to do here is say that when we go on square, we can say this.myFrame.navigate, and we give it a URI, so we say new URI, and the string, sorry, we give it a new URI, and that's going to be /pages/square.xaml, and that is a relative URI. So let's try that. Let's go and project run. I think I should be fine in IE for that. So we go to the square page and you can see we navigate to the square page. So we can cause navigation inside of the application just like we can cause it inside. We didn't implement the other 2 buttons, by the way, so they won't take us back at this point. And so we could implement those very quickly. We could go to our circle button, just say on circle, we could implement that. And essentially, let's just go back to the designer first and do the other one, which is triangle, which is just do on triangle there. And let's just go back to our code, and we'll just steal that piece of code and just get these things to navigate, in this particular case to the circle page, and in this particular case to the triangle page. And we can also, if we just went back to our main UI, let's just add a couple of other buttons onto this UI somewhere. They can pretty much go, perhaps they can go at the top up here, so we'll just bring in the UI again, and we'll go and find a stack panel, and make sure we're going into that grid again. Take that stack panel, just drag it out to that position up there at the top, just make it fill that space, go back to its properties and make sure it's just set to be horizontal again. Oops, sorry, make it horizontal. And into that one I've had a couple more buttons, so we could very quickly add a button and another button, and we could make these into sort of forwards and backwards buttons. So we could change this one to say back, we change this one to say forward in this particular case, and just write a little bit of code behind those as well. So we could just say on back, and back in the UI, just to get back to that other one we could say on forward. And if we just expand that code out again, and so what we can do is we can say if this.myFrame.can go back, and obviously we could control the UI based on that. We could say this.myFrame then go back, and similarly down here we could say if this.myFrame.can go forward, then this.myFrame.go forward. And let's just hit F5 and run that back up. Again, I think I'm going to steal the URL and just drop it into Firefox, because I have a problem with the beta, and it is a beta of course of IE that I've got there. So let's go see if we can go to the square, the triangle, the circle. Let's go back, let's go forward, let's go back, let's go forward, back again, back again. You can see that the URL on the browser is updating as we're navigating this way. So we've got navigation within the app, and we've got navigation outside the app. So that's working fine for us here. It's worth bearing in mind, of course, that this might be an out-of-browser application, in which case the browser wouldn't be there, and these navigation buttons might be a lot more relevant at that point. So you've got both of those things. The other thing that we're doing, we've still got these rather ugly URLs which we can fix at some point. The other thing that we could do is we could pick up information from the query string, so that might be something we want to do. So let's just shut this down and shut that one down, and let me just close some files down for a second so we can see what we're doing. So just hitting the F4 key again to bring the panels back in, and if we go to one of these pages, so for instance let's go to the circle over here, and let's just press F4 to make the code bigger. Because the circle here is a page, you can see the editor's already thrown it in. We have this override that we can use for when we are navigated to, and we get past over here content, we get past URI, but what we can actually do is use a thing called the navigation context. So this object has a thing on it called the navigation context, and we can get to nearly got it, we can get to the query string, and it's just a dictionary of values. So let's imagine, for instance, we're going to pass on the query string the color that we want the circle. So let's make this relatively easy for ourselves, and let's say red equals, we'll not do the right bit of checking here to make sure that the query string is correct. I suppose what we should say is if navigation context dot query string, if it contains a key for red, then we'll have the value of that key. So we'll just say integer.parse, and we'll take navigation context query string of red, and otherwise perhaps what we'll have is the value, should we go for white? Let's go for 255. So that's our idea about how to pull out the red value. We could do the same for, say, a green and a blue value. So let's have green. That's going to look in the query string for green. We'll take the value of green, and this could be blue, and once again we'll look in the query string for blue. We'll take the value of blue. And finally what we want to do is on this page, if we just go and take a look back in the designer, let's just go to the designer for this page, we have this ellipse here. I don't know that it has a name on it, so we could just go make sure it's named. Let's call it my ellipse. Let's go back to the code, and we could say, okay, my ellipse dot fill equals, let's make a new solid color brush, and we'll use color dot from ARGB, and we'll go 255 comma red comma green comma blue. And if we manage to get that syntax right, we should be changing the color of that thing. So let's rebuild. I made a mistake. It's got bytes when it wants integers. Well, we can probably fix that by changing these into bytes. So let's do byte.parse, not int.parse. Let's change this into a byte, and let's change this into a byte, and let's change this into a byte, and let's change that into a byte, and see if we can get away with that. Oh, and we've still got bytes in there as these values of 255, so let's cast those as bytes, cast those as bytes, and cast these as bytes. Let's try and build that. Finally I get my code to build. Okay, so let's go rerun this back up, and once again I'll switch the URL from here, go and drop into Firefox for this. So on my circle page, and only on my circle page right now, I should be able to go ahead and say red equals, let's go 0, and blue equals 0, and green equals 0, and we end up with a nice black circle. Or we could go maybe just go 255 on the red and we get a red circle. We could go, well, you get the idea at this point. We could go green, let's just set that to 255, and you can see how that's kind of working. So we can pick up the query string as we navigate into these things, and this means we can build pages that are, data bound to the data that comes into them. Now, we've still kind of got this rather ugly URI syntax up here. There's something else we can do around that, so let's just improve that and then we'll finish up. So I'll just shut down these two browsers again, and let's close down this particular code, and let's close down that particular piece of XAML, and just hit F4 to bring the tabs back in. So what we can do if we go back to our main UI, so let's just go back to our main page that has the frame on it once again, selecting the frame. It has a property on it over here called the URI mapper. I'll just search for that because I don't quite know where it appears. So you have this notion of a URI mapper, and we could create a new one of those. And we can edit the collection here in line, but it's a bit difficult for me to do at this resolution, so I'll just OK that. I'll pop into the XAML view of this. Let's just space that out again. And you can see here we've got a URI mapper. And within there we can, not so surprisingly, put URI mappings. And we can specify the URI that comes in. So for instance, let's say that the URI that comes in might be /shapes, and then we'll say shape. And what we want to do with that is we want to map it to /pages shape.xaml. So we're just going to say take one URI, oh excuse me, we lost that, take one URI and map it to another. And we also have a more complex URI that has a query string on it, so we could say, okay, take SDK mapping again, URI equals, which kind of look the same way really, /shapes. Let's say we wanted to do shape /r/g/b. So that's the format we want in our URI that comes in, and we want to map that once again to /pages shape.xaml, where red equals r and green equals g, and we've got two g's up there, so let's change that to a b. Blue equals b. And if we got that right, then we should have a mapping scheme set up for this now, so we should be able to just build the project again. So we'll just go and rebuild it, and we can just go and run it. Let me just steal the URL. Let me pop out of IE and into Firefox, just paste that in there. So we have our standard circle, but we should now be able to use those shorter URLs. So we should be able to say slash, and we should be able to go and say shapes/square, shape/triangle, shape/circle, And we should also be able to specify the color, so circle slash 000 should give us a black circle. It doesn't seem to be doing. Maybe we've got something wrong with that URI mapping, so let's just pop back to that and test and have a look what we did. And I suspect that what we've done is just put these in the wrong order, so let's just take this one, move it up here, and let's rerun. So we'll just run the project again. And again, I'm just going to steal that URI and copy it over into Firefox. So let's just steal that, paste it into Firefox, and let's try that URI again. So we'll say, let's just get rid of this piece, and we'll say slash shapes. Kind of got it there, and we get our black circle. We could change that maybe to a red circle. We could change it maybe to a purple circle. We could maybe change it to a yellow circle. And you see how that's kind of working. So we get control over the format of these URIs to make some nice short URIs instead of potentially ugly URI that we started with, and we'll just shut that back down and shut that back down again. So all in all here, even though we were just using simple examples really, let's just switch back over to the designer for this. What we've really tried to show is that you've got this notion of frames inside of Silverlight, and they provide a way of navigating between page-based context, and those pages can contain, can be aware as we're navigating to them. They can pick up the query string. We can integrate this with browser navigation, so the browser's back and forward button can work for this or not. It's your choice as to whether it works or not. And we can do nice things with the URIs to shorten those down. And it really provides a way of splitting up your Silverlight content such that it's easier to program because you're just navigating between pages, but also you can take those hyperlinks out of the Silverlight application, hand them to somebody else, as just the way that you expect hyperlinks to work on the internet. And it gives you this so-called deep linking into the middle of Silverlight content. So you can hand out somebody a hyperlink that actually links them to a particular page with particular state inside of a Silverlight application. That can prove to be a very, very powerful thing. So I hope you've got a flavour of that here and can see how that's at least basically set up.